Mr. Mayor, this shredding situation it's brought a cloud over this city, something that I'm sure that you as the leader of this city, I'm sure the people in this city, they really don't want to see it. Let's kind of go back in time a little bit. This all started with an incident in Missouri with then Lieutenant Cliff Busher. This started 2008, is that correct, when this incident happened?
I believe it did happen either in 2007 or 2008. And I believe that Cliff Busher held the rank of commander at that particular time.
Obviously, you weren't in office at the time, so this was something that you didn't have any oversight over of, how this was handled from the mayor's seat. Let's kind of pick it up where what was your reaction once you had heard about some of this stuff happening and you had heard that that Cliff had fired his assigned piece down there in Missouri? What was your reaction when you heard this whole thing had actually happened?
Well, first of all, let me just take the opportunity to thank you for doing the interview on a professional basis. There's been a lot of coverage with regards to this, and I have been available to the press. I've answered their questions. And the way we do that is on a professional basis, such as what we're doing today. And I really appreciate you taking the opportunity to do that. When you think back to when the actual incident happened, I was aware of it because that was reported in the media here in Springfield. It was not something that necessarily I remembered when everything sort of resurrected itself back. I do remember the press coverage on it, but not necessarily the specific details that had taken place. But it was not like this was something that did not receive publicity here in the city of Springfield. And as a result of that, Commander Busher was demoted to the rank of lieutenant, which was his civil service rank. And then over the period of time prior to the time that I came back into office in 2011, he was eventually promoted to the deputy chief of the investigations division.
When you had heard about what had happened down there, was it a little troubling to know that someone who was, an officer of the law here could be a part of something like that down there, and maybe the image it would have for the city and for the city's police?
If I had been in office at that particular time, given the way that we operate, we probably would have sought his termination as a result of that type of an incident, and we have done that with other officers. Now, again, when we approach these types of things, we try to approach it on a professional basis. People do make mistakes, and typically what we do is we give them the option that they can either go ahead and resign, or we will seek termination. And in most cases, what the officers choose to do is to just go ahead and submit their resignation. That really eliminates a lot of problems for the city when that happens. But the most important thing is that if you have someone that has done something that is criminally wrong, then of course there's going to be prosecution. But when you have someone that embarrasses the department or embarrasses the city, there is really a need to have swift action, and usually the way you do that, and the fastest way to do that, is to simply ask for their resignation and then to move forward from there, as opposed to going through a termination process that in some cases can take a period of years, and you're always in a position where someone can in fact be reinstated with back pay. And I can cite a particular case in the Springfield Police Department where that has happened under my watch, where someone was terminated prior to the time that I came into office, but through the legal process was able to come back onto the department.
With this happening, it's got to come a little bit as a shock that this would receive so much attention. Let's fast forward a little bit to 2013 now. A blogger in Springfield who primarily wrote about Springfield police puts in her FOIA request for this incident, and it seems that this was once pretty much a closed wound for Lieutenant Busher and for the city. It almost seems like this thing opened it once again and really brought a lot of a lot of concern about what happens with the city's police and how everything's handled. Looking back, do you think those involved, Mr. Colin, Ms. Wittendorf, then Chief Williams and Cliff, do you think that all those parties involved, perhaps with the exception of the IA investigator who kind of had a little bit of doubt or hesitation with this, do you think they may have acted too hastily with this, knowing what we know now?
You know, knowing what we know now in hindsight is always 20/20. There's no question that they did not follow a process that should have been followed. And one of the major mistakes that was made as this developed is that we have a labor relations manager who is in fact responsible for the negotiation of contracts. And that person was left totally out of the loop. In fact, the first indication that I had that this had taken place, and this had nothing to do with the shredding because I was totally unaware of that, was that on a Sunday after this had taken place, I received an email from our labor relations manager asking why she had been left out of the loop on a memorandum of understanding that had been entered between the chief of police and the Police Benevolent Protective Association. And as a result of that email, we had a meeting at 9 o'clock on Monday morning, bringing the parties in to find out exactly what happened. And that was the first time that I was actually aware that any shredding had been done or exactly what had taken place.
Do you think that the fact that there was a FOIA request into this particular situation, do you think that had any bearing on just how fast this whole process came together?
I think that if you go back and you look at this, one of the things you have to keep in mind is it was more than just a FOIA request for one file. It was a FOIA request for all files, and I think that that may have played a role in what did take place.
Once you caught wind of this, at any point, did you go to those involved and personally say, why did this happen? I mean, how did this happen? And, what can we do now? I mean, did you go to Cliff? Did you go to Chief Williams? Did you go to any of those people and say, I need to know what's going on? I'm the mayor. I need to have a little oversight of this. I need to understand why this happened and what, if anything, I can do to help in this situation.
Well, first of all, when I mentioned that we had a meeting at 9 o'clock on the Monday morning after I had received the email on Sunday, to say I was livid when I found out what had taken place would be an understatement. I think that anybody that was in the room, and there were a number of people that were in that room, probably have never seen me react the way that I reacted to that. And we were asking questions at that particular time. And again, the answers that we were being given were answers that they were trying to get by this FOA because of what they thought might be the embarrassment for individual officers within the department and that type of thing. And they also indicated that they thought what had been done was done legally.
And you obviously had concerns about that. I mean, you contacted the Attorney General's office.
Actually, what had happened was this was on the Monday after the actual shredding. It was actually the following week when I had received another email on a Sunday from Lieutenant Mueller from the Internal Affairs Department. And when I came in on Monday morning, I met with him that morning at about 11 o'clock. After I had the opportunity to talk to him to get his take on what had taken place as a result of everything that was happening, that was when we requested that the State Attorney General conduct an investigation into this, because we really wanted to get to the bottom of this to find out exactly what did happen and to hold people accountable for actions that they had taken. As it turned out, the State Attorney General referred it over to the Sangamon County State's Attorney as the proper place to look at this. He indicated that he felt it would be a conflict of interest. He referred it over to the Office of the State's Attorney Appellate Prosecutor. They conducted the investigation. They brought in the Illinois State Police, For the second time in the history of the state of Illinois, one of the things that I did was to waive the attorney-client privilege, because when you have an attorney-client relationship, attorneys do not have to answer questions. We waived that because attorneys were involved with this, and we wanted them to answer the questions because we wanted to be transparent and we wanted to know exactly what happened. Unfortunately, as a result of this investigation, which has taken a very long period of time, we really have no more information today than what we had then.
I mean, when we look at this, I mean, obviously, from the public's perspective, I mean, there's obviously concern that, well, if the police is doing this, what other kind of secrets or things are they doing without people knowing it? Was this a chance for you guys to hopefully have that kind of transparency out there and to hopefully regain at least a small portion of that trust that may have been lost through this process?
Well, first of all, when we talk in terms of the police, keep in mind that these were individuals.
Not the whole unit.
Not the whole unit. And that we had people within the police department who were concerned, and actually, as a direct result of meeting with a person from the internal affairs and actually looking at what he presented and going over his time frame, it gave me a much different understanding than what I had been presented up to that point. And at that point, we immediately called for an investigation because we wanted to get to the bottom of this, and we wanted to hold people accountable for any actions that they may have taken, and at the same time to be transparent with the public, because it's very, very important that the public have trust in their city government, in their police department.
Kind of going along with that, earlier you said that, you know, with the initial incident in Missouri, you would have probably terminated Cliff after that. Some groups have come down pretty hard, especially on you, and you've kind of just, I mean, you've taken it in stride, being the city's leader for all of this, with some groups asking why you didn't discipline those who were involved, whether that be, you know, the city's attorney, whether it be Chief Williams, whether it be any of those involved. What kind of response do you have to those people out there saying, you know, why didn't you fire them rather than accept their resignation?
Well, let me point out three things. First of all, there's three people that were deeply involved with this. All three of those people have left city government. What I did as a leader was to take immediate action to make sure that this did not happen again. As a leader of the city, what I tried to do was to bring an investigative unit in to take a look at this, to make a determination of exactly what happened. I mean, there's all kinds of rumors floating around out there. Most of those rumors have no basis of fact, and what I was really interested in doing was trying to get to the point where we actually got to the fact part of this so that we could see exactly what did happen, why it happened, and then to be able to hold people accountable. The people who were involved with this are no longer involved with city government. The people who were involved with this, we had a police chief who had more than 25 years service with the Springfield Police Department. If you look at his record, it was unblemished. We had a corporation counsel who was a very prominent attorney within the city of Springfield prior to the time that this took place. They received a great deal of negative publicity, and I think they paid a very high price for the actions that they took during this process.
So you're saying, I mean Chief Williams' record was almost, it was pretty much perfect, as perfect as you could get?
There was no question. He did not have a blemish on his record for his entire career prior to this happening, and he paid a very, very high price.
Looking back now, with what we do know, and you mentioned it earlier, that hindsight's 20/20, would you have accepted those resignations still, or would you have maybe pushed for a firing of one or all in that situation? I mean, were you kind of afraid that, you know, after the investigation had come back, that you might have fired somebody too early or prematurely?
Well, first of all, I consider myself to be a professional manager. I am by training and by experience. And one of the things that I've always tried to do is to approach things on a professional basis. And I realize that there are a lot of people that like to stand up and say, well, you know, I fired so-and-so or whatever. And really, what does that do? Does that really make anybody feel better? Does that really, help the person? You're always taking the chance that there could be a lawsuit, those types of things. Again, my experience has been that if we have someone who is going to leave, if we can do that and do it in such a way that you never have to worry about any type of a lawsuit being filed or that type of thing, you're far better off to do that.
This situation for the last 18 months or so is just, it's been under a pretty good sized microscope with, for lack of a better word, police corruption, questions about government involvement. Do you feel that the attention's been warranted?
Well, first of all, I do believe that this is something that has received far more attention than what it should have. It's a very, very serious incident. But the reality is there are people who paid a very high price for their involvement in this. We've had an investigation that the investigation has indicated is that there has been no criminal activity. Now, had there been criminal activity, then this would have stepped up to the next step, and there would have been a criminal prosecution as a result. But I think that as a result of the state police investigation and the Office of the State's Attorney Appellate Prosecutor looking at this, they have determined there is no criminal activity. Now, people made mistakes. They did wrong things. They paid a price for that. I think it really is time to move on. Again, as the leader of the city, as the mayor of the city of Springfield, we took immediate action. It wasn't a matter that we sat back and did nothing. I was the person who asked the state attorney general to do the investigation. We cooperated fully with the state police so that they could get any record, any information that they wanted. Again, we waived the attorney-client privilege, so our attorneys had to answer questions for them because we were as interested in getting to the bottom of this as everyone else was.
Have you yourself, and I'm gonna assume that the city council, even the police, have you guys learned something from this to hopefully avoid or prevent this sort of thing from happening in the future? And, if so, why is that? If we look at, this has had some pretty dark sides to it. Why is it so important that you guys have learned something from this to hopefully, not repeat history in this situation?
Well, one of the things you always want to do is to learn from mistakes, and certainly this was a major mistake. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. But I think what this has done is brought a focus on all of our record retention within city government, and probably not only within city government as a result of what has happened here, probably other governments have watched what has taken place here, have looked at the policies and procedures that they have in place, and are now making sure that they are following all the rules and regulations of the state of Illinois with regards to the destruction of any type of public records. There's no question that we were sloppy in terms of what we were doing. I don't know that we were any different than any other governmental body. I'm not offering that as an excuse. It's just simply a matter that was something that there was not a focus on. Today, there is a focus on it. Everyone is concerned about it, and I think we have put steps in place that we will never experience this type of thing again, which is the single most important thing. And yes, I have learned from this. And just as importantly, I think other people in city government and outside of city government who are involved in government have learned a great deal as a result of this.
You've not really strayed away from the questions about if somebody messed up. The evidence is out there that somebody messed up down the line. We know that Mr. Cullen had some input on that. We know that Ms. Wittendorf had some input. Obviously, the whole thing started with a bad judgment in Missouri. But you have kind of overseen all of this, not really involved with it in any way, but you kind of oversaw it. And some people question, how could you let this happen under your watch? Could you have done more? Why didn't you do more? What kind of response do you have to those people out there saying those questions?
Well, one of the things that I think that has come out of the investigation is the fact that I did not know anything about this till after it happened. Again, as a leader, I took immediate action to make sure that it was brought to light, that we had an investigation, and just as importantly, that this is something that would not happen in the future.
This has been a very long process for you, for the city, for those involved. Since it's been so long, and now that the investigation is wrapped up, I mean, I'm going to assume that everybody is ready to move on from this and hopefully start a new, better chapter in government affairs, police business. I assume you guys are ready to get past this little dark asterisk in the city of Springfield.
Well, there's no question. I think we are past it. I think that, again, we have learned a lot. As a result of this, we've put different rules and procedures into place to make sure that it does not happen again. And again, keep in mind, we admitted in court that we had made mistakes. We were not trying to hide from the fact that we made mistakes. And I think that as we look at the investigation that took place, we cooperated because we really wanted to get to the bottom of this, to find out exactly what happened, and to be transparent so that everyone is aware of it. Unfortunately, the report that has been issued really does not provide any information to me or to anyone else in terms of what actually happened.
Last question then. When we look at those involved, Mr. Busher, Mr. Colin, Ms. Wittendorf, Chief Williams, prior to this whole thing happening, even prior to Cliff's initial involvement with this in Missouri, it seems like everybody had a pretty solid record of performance, pretty good working relationship with each other within the city. After this has happened, for lack of better words, it seems like their image and their reflection in the community has taken a major hit, and it's brought a major blow to the city's image as well. Do you think at the end of the day that everybody's lost something out of this, not just the fact that this makes the city look bad, but do you think this has taken a toll on everyone involved, and that it's going to take, even though the investigation's over, this will take some time for people to recover from and hopefully regain trust in everyone?
Well, hopefully, people will regain trust within their government. I think that as we take a look at former Deputy Chief Busher, the incident in Missouri was a life-changing incident for him. He totally changed his life after that, and I think, again, that was one of the reasons that he was able to move back up through the ranks to a deputy chief prior to the time that I came into office. You always take those circumstances that happen and look to see what good can come out of those. And I think that, as disappointed as I am that this took place, I think that it has provided us with lessons that will allow us to improve in the overall delivery of services and what we are doing in city government.
So despite what's happened, we can't really forget the good things that those people have done, because it would be, I guess for lack of a better word, a disservice to who they were before this incident.
Well, again, I think they've paid a very, very heavy price as a result of everything that has happened.
I think we're done, Andrew. Well, unless you'd like to add something else, Mayor.
Well, again, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to discuss this in a professional manner, because I think that we have attempted to answer everyone's questions. I would point out that the report came out on Wednesday evening. I was doing 3 interviews the next morning that were set up very late the night before. I've never been afraid to discuss this with anyone, but I do expect that when I'm dealing with the press, that they are going to treat me professionally, and I always try to treat the press professionally. I understand that there are times when we're not always on the same page, and everyone has a job to do, but I think that acting professionally is something that's important for everyone that's involved, and I appreciate having the opportunity to do the interview in a professional manner.